right, good morning. We've been looking at the I am sayings in the Gospel of John. These are statements that Jesus makes about his self-disclosure, who he is, revealing himself to us. But it's not just who Jesus is. It's important for us to realize that Jesus is revealing who God is, who God the Father is, because Jesus comes to reveal. He's the Son sent by the Father to be the revelation of who the Father is. John alerts us to the fact that this is true in the prologue of John's Gospel, where he says, and the Word, that was Jesus, became flesh and dwelt among us, up close, personal, where we could see. And we've beheld his glory, the glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. And he tells us in verse 18 there, he says, no one has ever seen God, but the only God, that's Jesus, who was at the Father's side. He has made him known. The word there, make him known, is the word from which we get our word exegesis. Jesus exegetes God. Exegesis. What's exegesis? It's where you take something from a language that you really don't know and understand, and you get it translated into a language that you do understand a little better, and then you unpack what that means. Jesus comes to God being so far beyond what we could understand. Jesus translates God into human being and helps unpack who God is in his own life. And then Jesus went on to underscore that when he was talking with his disciples in chapter 14. Philip says to him, Lord, show us the Father, and it's enough for us. Jesus says, have I been so long with you and you still don't know me, Philip? If you've seen me, Phil, you've seen the Father. So if you want to know what God is like, pay attention to Jesus. Listen to what he says. Yeah, that's important. But also watch what he does. Because both what Jesus says and what Jesus does reveals God to us. But this morning I want us to deal with the seventh of the I am sayings, the last one. It's in John 15:1, where Jesus says, I am the true vine. And what I want us to do is kind of look at the larger passage there, John 15:1-8. And so maybe be getting that on the screen here in a moment. Maybe it's somewhere in there. There we go. Okay, one more now. Give me one more. There we go. All righty. Jesus says, I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Keep that, remember that. We're going to come back to that. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. Just removes it, tosses it. But every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes. Mark that one down. Why would he do that? Well, so that it may bear more fruit. He says, and you, talking to his disciples, already clean through the word that I've spoken to you, kind of already purged, already pruned. But he says, abide in me, and I in you, as the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I'm the vine. You're the branches. Oh, that we could keep that straight, right? Whoever abides in me and I in him, Jesus says, he it is that bears much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. Wow, Jesus. Apart from me, you can do nothing. If anyone does not abide in me, he's thrown away like a branch and withers, and the branches are gathered and tossed into the fire and burned. And I don't think he's talking about hell there. I think he's just talking about life being wasted. And the only thing it's good for is to maybe kindle a fire and get things going. I don't think it's hellfire, but it's life just kind of being burned up. But he says, if you abide in me and my words abide in you, whatever you wish will be done for you. And by this is my Father glorified, that you bear much fruit and so prove to be my disciples. First thing I want to do is give us a little background on Jesus' statement, I am the true vine, okay? And it's not so much I'm true as opposed to false, but maybe more true as opposed to mere wannabe. I think the scribes and Pharisees of Jesus' day thought that they were the epitome of the vine. They were what the vine was supposed to be. And Jesus looks at them and he realizes they are so stinking barren. But true as in the real thing, true as in the genuine article, the legit reality, instead of being a mere facsimile thereof. Jesus is the true vine. Now, in the Old Testament, the vine was Israel. The vine was Israel as the people of God. God had originally planted this people. It started with Abraham and his son Isaac, and then his son Jacob, a.k.a. Israel. Jacob's name was Israel. He had 12 sons, and these were the tribes of Israel. And it is this people, God started with an individual. He developed them into a clan, and then God took this clan of people, and he took them and planted them, transplanted them, as it were, into Egypt. And there, in the land of Goshen, they grew into this great nation over the next 400 years. But then, because God's purpose for them was not in Goshen, but God's purpose for them was back in Canaan, back in that strategic little neck of land that it was at the crossroads of the ancient Near East. God's purpose for them as a people was back in that strategic piece of property where the world would be flowing through this little piece of land and where they could be something special for God there. And so God takes them back there. And in Psalm 80, verses 8 and 9, the psalmist simply recalls, he said, you brought a vine out of Egypt. You drove out the nations, you planted it, you cleared the ground for it. It took deep root and filled the land. And so God transplants his people back into the land. How did he do that? Well, he rescued them from slavery in Egypt. He delivered them from their bondage. He took them out into the wilderness, and there he established his covenant with them. And he gave them instructions on how to live his kind of life, how to live a life that would reflect who he was. They were planted there, God's vine, God's vineyard. They were planted there to, as their vocation, to be the image-bearing people of the one true God. To live out a unique kind of life in their world that would reflect the uniqueness of who God was, so that the world could come to understand who God was. That's what he was up to. And he plants them there. And sadly, their history was one of continued failure to adequately reflect the God who had planted them there in the first place. Isaiah 5, 1 and 2 kind of bemoans their failure. And there we read, he says, let me sing for my beloved my love song concerning his vineyard. My beloved had a vineyard on a very fertile hill. He dug it and cleared it of stones and planted it with choice vines. He built a watchtower in the midst of it. He hewed out a wine vat in it, and he looked for it to yield grapes. But it yielded wild grapes, or yielded sour grapes. Grapes that would make the teeth grind. and the cheeks pucker. It just wasn't, they didn't bear the fruit that was the reflection of the God who had planted them there and chosen for them to be his image bearers. So when Jesus comes, and when Jesus claims that he is the true vine, Jesus is claiming to be all that Israel had failed to be. God had a purpose for his people, but his people hadn't measured up. But Jesus comes and he is the one who truly bears the image of the Father. He is the one whose life genuinely reflects the Father's life. And then Jesus comes and he makes this, gives us this amazing promise as the true vine that we in him can become what Israel had failed to be. We could bear fruit. We could be the people of God in Christ to bear the fruit of who God is in our world. Jesus, us, abiding in him, his life in us, we can begin to truly reflect the Father's kind of life. Wow. Isn't that amazing? And that's what fruit bearing is really all about. In this passage that we read earlier, Jesus has so much to say about fruit bearing. I think most of the time when we think about fruit bearing, we think about fruit bearing as something that we can do for God. I'm going to go do something for God. Make him proud of me. You know, I'm really going to serve him well. Give of your best to the master, you know. And we think of it in terms of, well, maybe that's, you know, introducing people to Jesus. Maybe that's, you know, helping out at the church or growing the church or discipling new people. Maybe, and this one I think probably gets a whole lot closer to it, maybe it's feeding the poor. Maybe it's giving a voice to the voiceless. I think we're probably getting closer there to what fruit bearing is. But I think of that, and I think, you know, that's those things are wonderful things. But probably they're more the result of fruit bearing than fruit bearing in and of itself. Fruit bearing, if I would understand it well, is the kind of life that God is being reproduced in the lives of his people so that the world, through God's people, can see and experience firsthand who God really is. I think that's the fruit bearing that God intends for us to be a part of. It's his character being woven into the fabric of our own lives. It's reflected in the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. It's the fruit of the Spirit at work in us. That's fruit bearing. It's the life of God revealed first in the life of Jesus, but then reproduced in the lives of those who would follow Jesus. So Jesus being the true vine, I want to suggest to you, works for us two ways. First way is that Jesus does for us what we could never do for ourselves. That you know, where we can't measure up, where we can't get there, regardless of how hard we would try. As human beings, we were created from the beginning to be the image bearers of God. Go back to Genesis chapter 1. God said, let us create mankind in our own image. And we were created to reflect who God was. And Israel's failure to live out God's kind of life had been preceded by Adam and Eve's failure to be the proper image bearers of God. It's been humankind's history. It's been humankind's history, on the broad scale, but it's been humankind's history on the individual scale too. Paul talks about it in Romans. The first 3 chapters of Romans, Paul is establishing the reality that everybody needs Jesus. Everybody needs what only Jesus can do. He talks about the Jew and the Gentile alike failing. And then in Romans 3:23, he says, all have sinned. That's a past tense there. I'll explain that to my Greek students later. It's an aorist, but in the indicative, it's past tense. But anyway, all of us have sinned. That's our history. Every one of us. We've all sinned. That's our history. But present tense, and fall short. It's not we fell short at one point, but we fall short of the glory of God. That's my today. That's not my history. That's my today. We fall short of that. And Paul had something to say in Romans 6 about what the results of that are. He says, for the wages of sin, Romans 6:23, the wages of sin is death. Wages. What's wages? Well, wages is what you get paid for what you do, right? What did I do? I sinned. What are the wages of that? What should I expect in payment for that? Death. But I couldn't do anything. Sin was my history. Falling short is my today. It's not just that I owe so much on my mortgage that I don't know that I could ever repay what I owe. It's like I can't make the payments today. I'm just getting deeper and deeper and deeper into that, right? But where the wages of sin was death, the free gift of God is eternal life in the Messiah, Jesus, our Lord. Because Jesus did for us what we could never do. He lived a perfect life, a life that fulfilled all of God's expectations for a human being, and he did it as one of us. The Word became flesh, became a human being. And he did that perfect life. He fulfilled all of God's expectations, and then he gave that life, that perfect life, for us on the cross. That's Good Friday. That's this coming Friday. Jesus says, here's my life. I'm going to do for you what you cannot do for yourself. And I'm going to do it in order that you may be forgiven. I'm going to do it in order that you may be redeemed. I'm going to do it in order that instead of tasting death, you may have life. And in a mystery and I can't explain it all, but somehow as we put our faith in Jesus, his death, that perfect life given for us, his death becomes our death. And his life becomes our life. Our life. And God, Jesus begins a work in us. At the core of our being, we're transformed. But we don't always, the transformation that happens in us at the core of our being doesn't always show up on the outside immediately. But Jesus changes us from the inside out and transforms us into his own image, the image of the Father. He gives us his own life Jesus produces fruit in us. And that leads us to the second part. First, he does for us what we could not possibly do for ourselves. And then he does in us and through us what we could never experience on our own. He creates this life in us. He takes up residence in us to transform us into what God intended us to be all along. And the wonderful thing is that God accepts us today as though we were the finished product. I don't get that. But he embraces us as though we were the finished product. But Jesus says, abide in me in order that you may bear much fruit. And so if fruit bearing is his life in us, then how do we bear fruit? Well, first off, I want to say it probably isn't going to happen by us simply working harder on our own, right? You ever observed a branch straining to produce fruit? You know, out on my back porch, we've got a tomato plant, and I'm really proud of this tomato plant. You know, I fixed the box that I put it in. I fixed the box. I gave it really good stuff on the bottom. And then I saved up eggshells for weeks. And I crunched them all up and I put them down there in the bottom. And then I planted that good soil. And then I put this other good soil. And that vine, that tomato vine, is firmly planted in that. And those branches just kind of hang there. They just kind of hang there connected. And 2 weeks, Dan, just 2 weeks, I've got 6 tomatoes. 6 tomatoes. Don't you go, sneaking on my back porch and grabbing my tomatoes, okay? But I've got 6 tomatoes that are growing there. And those branches, they're so small and so tender and so delicate and so weak, but they're producing fruit. It's crazy. And they're not producing fruit because they're straining so hard at it. They're producing fruit because they're simply connected to the vine. Jesus said, apart from me, you can do nothing. How many times do we try to prove Jesus wrong? We look at our own failure. And Jesus says, apart from me, you can do nothing. And we say, no, Jesus, I can fix this. If you just give me a little more time. And Dr. Phil would say, how's that working out for you? So as a branch, and that's the important thing. I'm just a branch. I'm not the vine. He's the vine. I'm the branch. Life isn't in me other than life being in him. And it's only as I am in him that there is life in me. And if I close myself off from him, there's no life in me, and I shrivel up, I fall up, and the only thing left to do is just kind of gather it up and toss it. Well, maybe let's make a fire. Because at least use it for kindling, right? But as a branch, my focus needs to be staying vitally connected with the vine. Fruit bearing is organic, not mechanical. Man. It's the natural result of a branch abiding in the vine. Do we have this one here? If the vine is healthy, do we have that one? All righty. If the vine is healthy, and the branch is vitally connected to the vine. Fruit bearing is going to happen. Well, trust me on this. Jesus is healthy. He's a great vine. He's a strong vine. He's an overcoming vine. They tried to cut him down one day, and he just came back up. Yeah. And if I get connected with him, his life flowing into me, something happens through my life. Fruit happens. Oh, so how do I abide? Okay. That's one of those things where, we've heard of all those spiritual practices, right? Bible reading, got to read your Bible, pray, worship, witness, ministry. Oh man, there is a place for all of that in the process. Please don't misunderstand me. God uses every single one of those things in the process. But you know what the sad part is? The sad part is that we can take spiritual practices and simply make them another way in which we strive to produce fruit. Where the focus is on our effort rather than on the life that is in the vine. So I want to suggest a different way of thinking about abiding, okay? The word abide itself speaks more of resting, of remaining, of relaxing, of sitting still, of soaking up. It's focusing on the connection and living on that connection with Jesus. I want to suggest it's more like spending time with a friend, Jesus, over coffee. Just being real with him about what life is like for you and where you're struggling and where you're needing some direction, but it's spending that time with a friend. Abiding is crawling up into God's lap and burying your head in his bosom. It's letting him wrap his arms around you and squeezing you, rocking you. Oh, seeing this mama rock that baby right there. Crawl into God's lap and let God rock you. Zechariah 3:17, it's where I get the picture. And it says, and he will sit there and rock you and sing songs of victory over you. Let God's grace envelop you and let him take his peace and press it into your heart and your mind. Abiding in him is like that. Abiding is understanding that you have been rooted and grounded in his love. And it's just sending your roots down deep into the rich soil of his love for you. It's that tomato plant on my back porch. Oh, man. It's rooted well. And it's rich soil. And it's producing fruit. As those branches simply abide in the vine. Oh, I want to stick with Jesus, right? I want to rely on him. I want to be committed to him. Pardon me. As the true vine. Now, so the path to fruit bearing, not working harder. Okay, can we mark that one off? That's not it. Second one, abiding, just getting focused, spending time, resting with. What does that take? What does that look like for me? But got to find it. I would imagine that reading your Bible is going to be a part of that, and prayer and worship especially like what we experience here today. Witness, ministry, all of those things will be a part of it. But it'll flow from Jesus at the heart. But there's one other thing I want us to be aware of from the text that we read. Be open to the process of pruning, okay? Pruning, despite what we may think of it, pruning is not a negative action on the part of the vine dresser. If you go back and look at that, he doesn't prune fruitless branches. He just cuts them off and tosses them. He prunes the branches that bear fruit. And he prunes them in order that they may bring more fruit. Now, pruning to me sounds uncomfortable. We're talking about healthy, living tissue being cut back. Whoops. That's a little scary. But Hebrews 12 would remind us that we don't need to take negatively toward God's discipline. Think pruning, okay? Because whom the Lord loves, he disciplines. But if you read a little further in that Hebrews 12 passage, he disciplines so that we may share in his holiness, so that he may weave into the fabric of our life his own character. Pruning, well, on in Hebrews 12, he says, for the moment, all discipline, again, I would say think pruning, seems painful rather than pleasant. But later, the writer of the letter to the Hebrews says, it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness for those who have been trained by it. The fruit of God's own life in us through these experiences. It's painful, pruning, but it's fruitful. Sometimes God takes an active role in that. I think sometimes God takes a more passive role in that. God allows things like people or events or illness or setbacks to kind of trim us back at times. But anytime pruning comes, pruning has purpose, and the purpose is that we would bear more fruit. Pruning requires that the branch be even more focused on drawing its life from the vine. Abiding is so much more than gritting your teeth and stoically hanging on when life gets tough. That's not abiding. That's gritting your teeth and stoically hanging on when life gets tough. Abiding is casting yourself back on the vine. It's clinging to the vine. It's saying, Jesus, I need to draw everything from you during this time in my life. I dare not turn to any other source for life. I can't afford to turn to another human being and expect another human being to be for me everything that I need at this point in my life. Jesus, I need you. The sad thing is when we're going through those times and when we cling to another human being for life instead of Jesus, we suck the life out of them, and then we're both sitting there in need. And it's not that we can't support each other in that. That's an important part of this thing called living out the Christian faith, where we're there for each other and with each other. But ultimately, Jesus has to be our source of life. And God uses sometimes day-by-day challenges, the stresses of life to strengthen and to grow us. Winemakers tell us that the finest grapes, and therefore the finest wines, are made from plants that have been stressed. Wow. For Christians, it's not the stress of trying hard to produce fruit. That's not the stress we're talking about. That's called burnout, and it doesn't work. But it's living in vital relationship with Jesus in the challenges of life. And that is fruit bearing. That's the path to fruit bearing. Jesus is the one who bears the fruit in us and through us. But that's the path to it. So bottom line this morning, Jesus is the true vine. Just remember, he's the one who has already done for you what you could never do for yourself, all right? He lived that perfect life. He satisfied all of God's expectations for you when you couldn't, for me when I couldn't. He gave his life, the redeeming sacrifice for you, for me, so that you and I could be forgiven and restored to God. The wages of sin is death, but the free gift of God is eternal life through the Messiah, Jesus, our Lord. Have you received that gift? Have you said, God, I need Jesus to do for me what I couldn't do for myself? I open my heart to him. I embrace him as the source of life for me. But second, I just want to remind us, he's the one who wants to do in you and through you what you cannot do on your own. Are you ready to quit the struggle? Give up the hustle, the striving, and enter into his rest. That's his invitation. You're ready to draw your life from him, knowing it's going to be a challenge, but especially when it's a challenge, to say, I'm drawing my life from you, Jesus. You will be the focal point of my life. Let his life be dominant in you so that your life can bear much fruit and so prove to be his disciple. At another time and in another gospel, Jesus had these words. I want to leave them with you. It's from Matthew 11:28-30, from the Message. Are you tired? Worn out? Burn out on religion? Jesus says, come to me. Get away with me, and you will recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you will learn to live freely and lightly. And I think what he means by that, and you will bear fruit. It's an organic thing. Let's pray. Father, sometimes we try so hard. And God, we think that if we quit trying so hard, we will in some way be failing you or disappointing you. Help us to realize that you never intended for us to try so hard on our own. Help us to believe the words of Jesus that apart from him, we can do nothing. Father, help us to make the true vine our resting place today in his name. Amen. God bless you. We'll see you later.